Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to 10X Stage on this final day of what has been a fantastic event. Over the past few days, we've really heard from an incredible lineup of speakers, and today will be no different. Our first session is The Creative Edge, where AI, venture capital, and fashion converge. This session will explore how technology, investment, and creativity intersect to drive innovation. It will focus on the opportunities and challenges at the convergence of AI, venture capital, and fashion. This panel connects women from diverse industries, tech, venture capital, and fashion, who may not typically interact. By bridging these different sectors, the discussion highlights the power of creativity and innovation, showcasing how women are inspiring collaboration across traditionally separate fields. Please join me in welcoming Morin Oluwole, Board of Directors, Breitling; Cece Johnson, President of the Berlin Fashion Film Festival; Danielle Bruin-Graham, Investor at the Canada Startup Association; Caroline Yap, Managing Director of Global AI Business and Applied Engineering at Google; and our moderator, Suzanne Kianpour, founder and CEO of Helmet to Heels and creator and host of the BBC's Women Building Peace series. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I am so excited about this conversation, Women Building Creative Synergies. And as was mentioned in the introductory remarks, it seems like on the surface, this isn't a combination of topics that would find themselves in the same place on the same stage. But as we're going to see in this conversation today, it is crucial, and we're basically going to set the stage for continuing this combination moving forward in the digital revolution that we are experiencing. So I wanted to start with Caroline. Tell us, how is AI driving innovation in the creative industries, such as fashion?
So I want to start with a couple of things. There's a difference between predictive AI and generative AI. Predictive AI is things like Google Maps, right? Search, Gmail, knowing what your next word is. Multimodal AI, which is what generative AI is, has really changed industries like fashion, specifically luxury, and construction. I know those are two very, very different, very opposite industries. And the reason I bring that up is because of this multimodality, you can now use text, video, image, voice, and even code if you're a developer, to have large language models help you with your design. So it's become an extension for creatives and designers to bring their ideas to life a lot quicker and a lot faster. While at the same time, because it has the text component, you can specify boundaries such as cost, materials. You can really specify and then let it generate and bring your ideas to life.
So that's a perfect segue into, you mentioned cost, into the investor side of things. So Danielle, I wanted to ask you, from an investor point of view, what opportunities do you see at this intersection, and how can this innovation speed up the process?
Thank you. So yes, as an investor, we are looking at a wide variety of technologies led by women entrepreneurs. And so when you see this convergence of AI, sustainability, technology, and finance come together to solve global problems, it really can impact the fashion industry in particular. If you think about sustainable fashion, there's been a lot of controversy recently around fast fashion or models, not to be confused with AI models. And thinking about, where is that line that we draw around human creativity versus data inputs? And so there's a huge opportunity when you're thinking about the kind of that rigidity of AI and data analytics combined with the creativity and the need for change and experiment with the human models. And so there's a lot of opportunity with our investment model to invest in technologies that are ethical as well as sustainable, as well as applying technologies at the forefront of what we're able to develop.
So we're going to have to put our luxury representative in the hot seat now. Morin, how is technology influencing the way brands like Breitling are connecting with consumers, and how do you see this evolving, and how do you see potentially facing these challenges that AI could bring up?
So thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. The beauty of the luxury industry is that you have a sector that's based on craft, that's based on handmade products, that's based on high quality, and it also permeates through time. And I think also another aspect to know for the luxury industry is creativity. So when you're working with physical goods that have taken hours and hours and hours to produce, sometimes there can be a blocker as to how technology can facilitate that. But I think the idea to have is that technology is an enhancer and not a replacement. That's the first piece. And when I say enhancer, it should enhance the creativity process. For example, how can you use generative AI to imagine different models of goods, whether it's a new handbag collection, whether it's different combination of even fragrances, for example. That's how that can be a complementary tool. And I think that can go all the way across the supply chain, because when you're looking at creativity, you can utilize Gen AI for design development, but then when you're looking at also supply chain and logistics, how do you make sure that when you're delivering goods to different markets, to different locations, you have the right amount, because you can't overproduce. It's not mass production. You're producing unique pieces, and so you need to be very careful to make sure that you're actually catering to the consumer that's best attracted by these goods, these products and markets. And so there you have an operational artificial intelligence use case that can really support the business end objective. So I think the idea to keep in mind is that it should be an enhancer. It can complement this notion of high quality handmade goods, and it should also, at the end of the day, support the business objectives that a luxury brand can have. So it's not something to be scared of.
I think we're in an interesting place when it comes to the luxury industry, and then also how it relates to fast fashion, as you mentioned. And so I want to bring it over to Cece to discuss your keynote that kind of touches on this, which is called the Runway Exodus. So tell us a bit about that and walk us through how this theme translates into the future of fashion.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm the president of the Berlin Fashion Film Festival, and for this year's edition, which is actually next month, Runway Exodus actually encapsulates various shifts that we've been observing in the fashion and luxury industry. So the focus yesterday in conversation was, as an example, how LVMH is now turning into a production company. They recently opened studios in Hollywood. And another example is the Kering Group, who recently acquired CAA, which is the world's largest entertainment, agency. So when you think of actors like Penelope Cruz or Viola Davis, they're all represented by CAA. So what does it mean for a luxury conglomerate to own these, creative agencies or production companies now? How is that going to affect the way that we consume content, specifically films or fashion films? How do we receive that information without being overwhelmed with product placement? How is that going to affect styling, as a career? Is everything going to be product placement, for example? And when we think of Runway Exodus, we don't only think of luxury fashion brands, we also think of other industries stepping into the fashion world. So a very good example is Riyadh Airlines, for example, recently presented a couture collection.
I was at that reveal. So it was amazing.
Yeah, they presented at Paris Fashion Week, right? So, and when you look at all of the, different hotels creating, content and so on, there's always a fashion element to it. So one thing that we decided to do for this year's edition is to create a hospitality, travel, and leisure award category, so we can place hotels, we can place airlines that are having their own runway exodus and stepping into fashion and luxury.
So when I hear about this, and I've had sustainability on my mind a lot when it comes to fashion, I actually found this amazing story in Paris called the Renaissance Project, and it's this atelier that employs and trains refugees from conflict zones on how to upcycle materials into couture. So as someone who is a former BBC correspondent in Washington to war zones, now is using fashion to get people to pay attention to the news, because especially the younger generation is globally curious but news avoidant. I think about we've all touched on this intersection of sustainability and AI and the future of luxury, but does it really matter if no one's paying attention? So how do each of you, how much have each of you thought about, let's go to Caroline because you kind of touched on this already, is that how do you get the public to pay attention to the work that you're doing at this intersection?
So I'll come back to the sustainability piece, because Google overall, we have a big sustainability practice, but I'll talk about that in a second. Here's something that's been really interesting. I don't think a lot of people would equate gaming to luxury and high fashion, because most people, especially in the US market, assume that a gamer is, typically a teenager sitting with a hoodie, male or female, and is covered in crumbs. We call them the Doritos crumbs or the Cheetos crumbs, because they're just playing games. But actually, there's a global market of gamers who wear high fashion, right? Because they also play and see each other. They're not just in the game in their avatars. And so there's quite a lot of people who are now vibing with these sort of brands, to the point where there's a lot of digital areas where luxury brands are looking into targeting in games, having avatars within the games, or boutiques actually looking like the boutiques in game. So that's an area that a lot of luxury brands are moving into, is that whole bridging the physical and digital world kind of aspect. From a sustainability perspective, it's understanding the eco fabrics, where they're coming from, what's going to happen. It's a tough one, but a lot of the research we do on material science is also to solve with some of that.
That's so interesting. No, I hadn't thought about that at all. So then how is that monetized?
Oh, we love to monetize everything. There's so many business models out there for what can be applied from an AI standpoint. And if you think about fashion and the trends that are looking at right now, it's additionally personalized at an individual level, which could be both fabulous and also deeply concerning when you think about how are you getting access to all of these fabrics. And so that's where a more ethical supply chain management solution could come into play. So we can solve our own problems on a continuous basis, as long as we're tracking how we're managing these potentially biased algorithms, especially if they skew towards a particular, let's say, type of model or human versus a broader sector of the humanity. And so you want to make sure that we're staying ahead of the algorithms, that we're applying leadership that's diverse and representative, both from a leadership standpoint in the technology field, as well as who the teams are that are implementing these biased algorithms, and ensuring that we're managing every part of the technology as it's being applied.
So I think I'm still stuck on the kind of monetization side of things, because it's really, I can see this synergy in this tech space, which I think the average person isn't thinking about. So going back to your product placement, is everything product place, and then thinking about places like Breitling, is that beneficial to the luxury industry? Does it actually end up converting?
Yeah, I think there are two ways to look at it. I think there are two key themes from a consumer perspective that are important to have in mind. The first theme is peace of mind and trust, and then the second theme is transparency and circularity. So I'll take the first theme first. In terms of monetization, I don't think that the answer is there a direct monetization opportunity, but how do you keep the consumer loyal? For example, from a peace of mind and trust point of view, when you're able to have technology that helps brands and consumers identify the source of materials, the source of production in a context where counterfeiting is a business that's now grown to tens of billions of dollars around the world, then you're able to actually have a source of tracing that allows consumers to have peace of mind and trust that the product that they're purchasing is an original product. It's actually that handmade product, and it's not a fake product that's sold, across different secondary or tertiary markets. So that's the first piece that I think is important from a consumer mindset. And the second is this notion of circularity. When you have the ability to identify, the source of materials and to integrate that into the entire life cycle of a product, then you're actually able to say, I, as a company, which plays a lot into brand reputation, I'm sourcing ethical materials, whether it be gold or diamonds or whatever it may be, and that actually contributes to the brand reputation in the eyes of the consumer, which makes them trust in the brand more, and at the end of the day, purchase more. So that's how I think it's important to look at the monetization aspect, because at the end of the day, it contributes to the security that consumers see and feel when they want to invest in high quality products from a luxury brand.
And is this intentionality something that is at the forefront of each of your individual industries and areas of expertise? Because the reason why I ask this is, as a new entrepreneur, having moved over from corporate journalism, I often find difficulty in kind of figuring out how that intentionality, which in essence is part of public service, can actually be profitable.
I'm going to go first on this one. So a lot of people know Google as a consumer business, and also with search, YouTube, Gmail. For us, we've always been bold and responsible is what we say. So in all of the products we bring, not just because it's, there's AI in it, it's the fact of how do you think about different people from different cultures all over the world who are going to be using and interfacing with these technologies? And how do you surface things that are cultural nuances but matter, right? I think everyone gets really stuck on the technology and of language being linguistic, but language is linguistics and culture. And each brand has a different meaning in different markets. And so aspirational brands, they're luxury brands, but they're aspirational brands like Gucci. And then there's the high-end luxury brands like LVMH, right? And like Breitling, and of course even the watch pyramid, they're different. And so you can have a brand voice, but in different markets, that brand voice might change. And so how do you intentionally think of all the personas across the value chain? For us, we also build tools and technologies for consumers to use, but also for brands to market with. How are we making sure that the platforms can do that and still give them the measurements they need so that they can decide what they do in those markets?
Let's go next.
Yeah, I have a few examples of startups we've invested in where they've been able to apply these AI algorithms to art fraud, for example. So you have a solution that can identify fraudulent art at a better rate than a human eye. And so that's creating more and more opportunity for people to source and apply and purchase that art with that conscious of, I'm actually contributing to the real artist, and I know that this is real. And then we have other companies that are even connecting the dots for those companies and saying, well, we have a robot that can reproduce maybe unfinished works of a late artist, or apply their works to ensuring that it's more accessible to the broader communities by reproducing this art in an ethical way in conjunction with the artist. So again, applying these technologies can monetize and support those artists as long as it's applied in the right environment, and those are some examples of companies we've invested in.
Yeah, I think let's on the art. Yeah.
I'm happy to give a different example, so not from the Fashion Film Festival angle, but from a museum angle. So one of the projects that I'm working on with the City of New York is the Hip Hop Museum opening next year, and we're developing it in collaboration with Microsoft and Chase. And what's very exciting about it is that we are giving virtually everybody in the world the opportunity to curate the artifacts from the museum, right? So there's a lot of conversation, as you know, when it comes to museums and looting and, you know, how artifacts are acquired or have been historically acquired. And I think the novelty with this museum is saying, well, you know, wherever you are in the world, if you are a hip hop head, if you have some items from 10 years ago or 20 years ago, this is your museum, so you get to curate it. So we've very organically been able to receive so many artifacts from Japan, from Africa. People are sending, you know, magazines from back in the day or CDs from back in the day. And we're also, by way of creating virtual experiences, digitizing a lot of these artifacts. So if you're physically not able to fly to New York City to attend an exhibition, you still get to experience it in the metaverse.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's very cool.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on one aspect I think is an important source of new business development, especially for luxury brands. I think that there's no surprise that 2024 and even going into 2025 has been a challenging year for the luxury industry. LVMH reported yesterday their overall earning is minus 3% versus the same period last year. So there's a challenge across the industry. So that forces this notion of new brand experiences outside of purchasing product. And one thing that I'm really excited about is this idea of experiential luxury and how digital can really play a role there. Because you have a product, but the product is kind of the end objective. There's this idea of a brand universe, which has been translated into different ways by different brands. There's food and beverage. You see, you know, the Tiffany's Cafe and the likes. You see the Bulgari hotels, et cetera, et cetera. So this notion of brand experience is actually fresh and ripe for development when it comes to digital, because you don't have to worry about the quality of a product that's reproduced in a digital context, either via augmented reality or virtual reality. You can actually integrate this brand universe visually with the brand codes and actually build it into an experience that people can feel and that they can integrate themselves into above and beyond a product. So this is really an exciting opportunity to come.
That goes back to the gaming, right?
Yeah.
You know, you actually see the place in game and you can unlock a different way to experience it.
Well, I think there's also, going back to the theme of intentionality, and especially the Gen Z generation is very socially impact focused. And so they really look at the brands that they engaged with, how they're aligned, which, I mean, you know, this is a very volatile year. And even if you think you might be in a bubble as a luxury brand or as a tech company, like you might think, okay, that's problems happening in the world, that's geopolitics, whatever, it's still affecting every single sector. How do you square that? I don't know, who wants to take that? That's a live button issue, I know. Let's start with Cece, you're closest.
Oh, wow, you're putting me on the spot. I think that, you know, there's a lot of conversation online about mental health, vulnerability, and so on. And I think that even from a corporate standpoint, it's okay to be vulnerable, acknowledge that you are experiencing, you know, a certain level of hardship and that you're facing something or a period sometimes that you don't always understand, but you're actively working on building the resources and the tools to get to the finish line, you know. And I think, yes, we're talking about transparency. That's another level of transparency that I believe, especially Gen Z, would welcome from company, because sometimes I think there's a holier than thou approach that as corporations, you know, we tend to have. And it's okay, you know, to approach this specific demographic with a lot of vulnerability as well. Like, we're actively working on this. We do not understand what this is, but, you know, we welcome your suggestions, and you are creating dialogue, and it's not a one-way street anymore.
Well, and that's kind of that's one of the main, I think, benefits of content and collaborating on content. And I hope to, personally as a journalist, I hope to see that there's more of that, because I think it can have impact. Now, as we're starting to wrap up, I want to address the elephant in the room, which is that we are at a tech conference, but women in tech are still not equal to men, I would say. How do each of you see that changing, and what can we do to change that, especially on the female founders funding level? Let's start with our investor on the stage.
Yeah, well, our fund is very much focused on women entrepreneurs. In North America, I don't know about the globe, but it's still only 3% of venture capital that goes to women entrepreneurs. And so in order to change that, we really have to start at the ground level with not only the entrepreneurs themselves as women, but also the investors, and think about who they connect with. We were talking earlier about, well, who's going to buy in first? Who's going to understand your idea? Who's going to have experience? Angel investors, people who have worked in your industry, have an understanding of what you're doing. They're going to buy in early. They're going to be able to put their capital where their mouth is and where you need them to. And so that's where those connections are. And if all you have is a layer of a homogenous group in those first stages, then that subjectivity applies to the next layer and the next layer. And then all your Series A and B companies are led by men, and only men, right? And so when we're looking at our fund, we invest in women, but we also invest in the education of women investors. And so I think that combination across not only Canada, but the world needs to be applied in order to see that change and that extra effort, because it takes a village to build a startup.
So final thought from each of you, starting with Morin.
Yes, so I come from a context, I worked at, the biggest, arguably, second to maybe Google, tech company for almost 20 years. And when I started at the company in 2006, there were very few women, especially in roles related to product. And so I didn't have a roadmap as to what to do, how to navigate to grow and build my career, knowing that that was the case for me from a personal point, and then I'll speak to the systemic level. From a personal point, my goal is to actually impart this practical knowledge and guidance that I learned over 20 years to founders, to women that are building companies, investing myself personally in funds that are really focusing on women, because I can understand the desert of resources and guidance and support, because I went through that myself on a personal level. And then the second piece, when I think of systemic and how to really evolve that, is utilize your position of power, because we are in positions of power, each of us in different ways. For me, it was making sure that when I hired people in my teams, that I was looking at profiles, obviously top talent, so there's no question as to is this person more or less qualified because they're a woman, but hiring people who can actually build that diverse, and when I say diverse, it's not just cultural diversity, but who could bring different experiences that have an impact on business. Because at the end of the day, you can, if you're pushing diverse objectives, but it's not having a tangible impact on the business, you're not going to be taken as seriously, even though what you're doing is good for the company. So I really focus on making sure, build different teams with different perspectives and make that impact within the system to ensure that I'm actually going to touch the bottom line and have an impact on the bottom line, and also teach people what I had to learn on my own as an individual.
I'm afraid this is the end of our time, and I hope that this message is one that every single man in this room is able to walk away with. Are we? Oh, you want Q&A? I don't know if I'm allowed to do Q&A. Am I allowed to do Q&A? I can do one Q&A, I'm told. Okay, let's have we love to hear from men supporting women building tech. Okay, right here.
We'll take one Q&A from the audience. Go ahead, sir.
Am I on? Okay.
Yeah.
My question really relates to the funding issue.
We can't hear you.
Sorry, it's gone. Okay, you mentioned that only 3% of the funding goes to female entrepreneurs. So my question is this. At the moment, there are around 3,500 billionaires on the planet. And of those, 12% of them are female. So why are there not the female billionaires investing in female entrepreneurs?
It's a good question.
As an investor, I'll let you take it, but why should it be only up to the female billionaires to invest in female investors? That's the question I would pose.
Should it?
Yes.
It
should be across the board, so
but
that's the first
It shouldn't,
perspective.
but the point is, for you to make the point that only 3% of investment are going to females, that's where the question comes. But
Yeah, well, I mean, 3% isn't a point, it's a fact, but it really is about unlocking that capital, right? And so seeing that women are also getting a massive wealth transfer as they live longer, we're also seeing the opportunity to empower more women to lead their family offices and their wealth and invest. And so it's that educational process. We know that there's social and cultural and historical reasons for this differentiation from a gender lens. And so thinking about how we can work with them, men and women, and also with the early stage startups that we want to build the future with.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you for all for being here.
Thanks so much to our wonderful panel.